the goal of an ethnographer is really to get in deep and to get in as close as we can to understand the lived experience of
Mhm.
people, which often means like stepping out of your own, right, into another one. And the fashion world, like the world of the VIP parties, they're extremely seductive, and that's part of how they operate, right? It's the promise and the potential and the thrill of being included in a world that is so exclusive, and the right crowd tires quickly, and they're always looking for something new, and that's the nature of fashion, which is predicated on change. It's the nature of luxury experience economy too, right? You can only have the same experience in the same club
Mhm.
at a high level before you want the next thing.
Welcome to Luxury on Air, where we explore the trends, innovations, and personalities defining and redefining the luxury industry.
$1 million birthday parties, mega yachts on the French Riviera, and $20,000 bottles of champagne. In today's new Gilded Age, the world's moneyed classes have taken conspicuous consumption to new extremes. And today I'm speaking to sociologist, author, and former fashion model, Professor Ashley Mears from Amsterdam University. In her book, Very Important People, Ashley takes us inside the exclusive global nightclub and party circuit from New York City and the Hamptons to Miami and Saint-Tropez to actually reveal the subtle economy of beauty, status, and money that lies behind these spectacular displays of wealth and leisure. My name is Felicitas Morhart, and I'm so happy to present you a new episode from Luxury on Air. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here.
You are a professor and a former model. Wow, wow, wow. This is pretty unique. So can you tell us a little bit about your trajectory?
Yeah, well, I would say it is and it isn't unique. A lot of academics in sociology, because if you're doing the ethnographic method, which I do, you're studying things that are on the ground, and we're often attracted to studying places and scenes with which we are familiar. So I know a lot of sociologists who make an object of research out of things that they have personal experience with. And so that's quite normal. But it is unique to come from fashion modeling into academia. That's an unusual pathway. And I would attribute it to the way that the modeling industry is structured as a career for women. It really overlaps with the times with a woman's education years is like the peak career time for fashion. So in that sense, maybe it says I wasn't a really good fashion model, and so that's why I was still able to keep a foot in college and then pursue grad school. So that said, yeah, I started modeling when I was a teenager in the suburbs of Atlanta. Atlanta is a very commercial market, so I was doing shows at the mall, these little commercial jobs. And when I got into college at the University of Georgia, I really was a much better student than I was a model. But I would take trips in the summer and go work in Japan. I did a couple months in New York and Milan. And this sparked a real curiosity in me in questions about how markets are organized differently in these different cities around the world, questions of value, and why is it that some faces and some bodies become so popular and dominate the market while everybody else gets squeezed out, because modeling's, it's a winner take all hierarchy. So I was really interested in that. And then I took these sociology courses meanwhile, and I took a course on the sociology of work and occupations. And we were reading all of these ethnographies where a researcher had gone and studied, the work of being in the low-end service economy or working at a funeral home. And I was just like, man, somebody really should do an ethnography of the fashion modeling industry, because I've seen it firsthand and it's really sociologically interesting. So that's how I launched into academia from fashion.
Wow, that's amazing. And I could imagine that you probably also face some prejudices. I mean, beautiful professors are maybe not what people have in mind when they think of somebody who is doing ethnographies and writing books. So, did you encounter any of these?
Well, yes and no. I think that in graduate school, so I was at NYU, and I really had the good fortune of connecting with a few professors who became my mentors that were just really excited about the project and the intellectual stakes of the project. And I remember my mentor, she's this feminist luminary, Judith Stacy, when I was interviewing for jobs after the PhD and trying to get a tenure track professorship. Yeah, she was coaching me on how to distance myself from this marginalized, feminized, and therefore stigmatized world, which is not the bedrock of social science, to study fashion and femininity and consumption. Historically, sociology is really grounded in the study of production, and inequalities. But yeah, we I did my practice job talk and I had the recording of it and we were going through it and she was like, you need to stand taller and speak louder. And what are you going to wear? It needs to be muted and kind of you know, downplay the fact that you are in fashion.
Wow.
But I don't think on the whole that I faced too much discrimination. I think that there's a tendency to see the topic, because it is a sexy topic, and all my topics are sexy topics, to see them therefore as frivolous, right? But frivolous things have very serious consequences, as we know. I hope once you get past that hurdle as a sociologist, you can really see the important things here.
hmm We come also to that a little bit later when we talk about your methodology, but I can imagine that when you do this ethnographic research and you have to become a model again to research it, you also have to always be observing yourself, right? Not to being sucked into this life and losing somehow the independence as a researcher.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about that. There's a few ethnographers write about this at length about how to maintain this balance between your own life and the lives of people that you study. And that's what led me at many times to wonder, like, ooh, maybe I could become a model like that. Right, totally irrationally at the age of 24, which is not the right age for a woman to really take off in fashion. And there I was, getting my PhD to become a professor and really seduced by the possibility that this might really happen for me. This world of fashion.
Wow. Well, then with that, let's just dive right into it, right? And let our listeners hear what you have found. So, I can say I loved your book. It was the best read since quite a while that I had.
Right.
And first thing was that I learned that the elite class follows a transatlantic calendar of a VIP scene. So, for example, March is the Miami month, and then they are migrating to other locations according to the party months. So, can you explain a little bit this phenomenon?
Right. So it is this global VIP scene, kind of like an anthropologist studying a tribe. I found the people that are organizing the parties, and they're based in these clubs that are open most times around the year in New York. But they also have pop ups and they go to special events whenever the crowds and the excitement goes somewhere else. And so in the summertime in New York, a lot of people go to the Hamptons on the weekends. Or now in March, people will go to Miami for the electronic dance music festivals, South by Southwest in Austin, right? St. Bart in January, Saint Tropez in the summer, to the point where even the clubs in New York in the latter weeks of August, they would close and post a sign on their door that said, we're opening in Saint Tropez for the for the summer holidays, right? And everybody knows what that means if you're in that world, because there really is this global jet set of people that know the right places to go. And it also pegs closely to the art world, right? So Art Basel and so on. Um, and so I couldn't, as a tenure track professor on a professor salary, really hop around as much as I would have liked to. But what I did was I got in with the organizers of the parties, the people that work for the clubs, and then they work for private parties and yacht parties around the world. And they shared with me their dates and invited me. And then when I could get time off of teaching and get the funds, then I went with them and I followed them.
I'm pretty sure that your students love that when my professor just comes back from Ibiza and then teaching the next class. So,
Yeah.
which
Right.
are those clubs, or are there any enigmatic clubs that those people have been going to since decades. There must be some cult clubs, no?
Yeah. So, yeah, some clubs that had been in business for a long time that really broke that cycle, that are now closed, but they made the careers of Strategic Group in New York City. That would be, Marquee, but then they had a number of spin-offs like, Lavo's still in Vegas, there's one in Dubai now, like, they had these they became franchises globally and, really launched those guys who opened those clubs into nightlife and hospitality and food and beverage, and those guys are former promoters who used to bring in the right crowd for the big clubs in the '90s, which, didn't last to past the '90s. Um, and yeah, still the iconic one. So there are these scenes of high-end restaurants. So Cipriani's in New York is a good example, right? And then you have that globally in other cities as well. And what is in Saint-Tropez? There's Nikki Beach. Yeah, so the Nikki Beach has the famous brunch parties where people get crazy and they order too much champagne and shake it and spray it on each other during the daytime. So that's a beach club party, and that's also in Dubai now. Yeah, so wherever you see these pockets of wealth, you'll see these places and their owners either recreating a similar space if it's a branded franchise or creating something new, but it really is like old wine in new bottles.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just about to say Nikki Beach is a franchise, right? So
Yeah.
once you see, you know, okay, this is the location, this is the supposed to be VIP location, and this is what you
Yeah.
expect there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, well, you just mentioned you entered into the sphere. You call them the cool people, right? Who have access to these
Yeah.
locations. How did you get there? And you were mentioning the notion of promoter, which was a concept that I was not aware of.
Right, yeah, so a promoter is somebody who works on a contract basis for a nightclub. Every night, their job is to bring in the right crowd, and they get paid sometimes per head of the person that they bring in that's a very important person or the cool people. And so their chief currency are young women that are or look like fashion models. And so that's how I stepped in because I was an ex-model. I'm what you would call in the field a good civilian. So a civilian is somebody who would be excluded, like in military parlance, civilian's not part of the action or pedestrian. A good civilian is somebody who's not really a model but can pass because the lights are low. And I was like, I was 32 at the time that I did the field work, which is much older than most of the girls there who could be as young as 18, even younger sometimes. And then, yeah, up into mid, even late 20s, but 30s, I was quite an aberration to be with a promoter. And so, yeah, I came in as a good civilian in this world. And, the promoters, they sometimes get paid, per girl, like number of so-called quality girls that they bring, good civilians or actual models. The closer a woman approximates the look of a fashion model body, the more valuable she is, and so they call these quality girls, and they get paid depending on the quantity of quality is how they put it. So, they might also get paid a commission of the bottle sales if they bring in a rich client, like a big spender, somebody that will make, buy a lot of champagne. They might get 10 or even 20% commission off of those bills. And promoters are, on the one hand, very well paid. It's very, if you think about it, so it could be $80 per head of girl that they're bringing, but more established promoters will just have a deal with the club where they might get paid 800 at the lower end, maybe 200 or 300, but at the higher end, 800 or even 1,000 per night to bring anywhere between 8 and 15 fashion models to a club. And yeah, that's lucrative because they're working 6 days a week, sometimes more, and then they're doing these private parties for yachts, and so I'm bringing people to the right parties for rich people. And, it's well paid, but it's also pretty, precarious as an income. I mean, think about what it would take for you to round up 15 models, every night and bring them to a nightclub and have them enjoy it, right? And wanna come back. So it's quite a hustle, the promoters, and that's where I came in. I had met some of them from my time studying the fashion modeling industry, and I just reactivated my contacts with them and started going out, and it was actually really easy. I just put on my high heels and my little dress, and I borrowed a Chanel bag from one of my friends, and And I went out and really like dressed like that, a promoter will find you, right? Like I didn't have to work that hard. And I was a really willing participant. So promoters really need girls that are reliable to show up. And it's like, I'll show up. Like I'll come out every night. I had taken the time out from teaching at Boston where I didn't have to be in the classroom, and I moved back into a little tiny bedroom in Williamsburg that my friend was subletting. And I was just taking the train into the Meatpacking District, taking the L train from Williamsburg night after night and meeting promoters, trying to interview them during the day, spending time with them during the day, seeing all the work. And one promoter even told me there can be no night without the day. Which is really true because it's such a hustle trying to get all of those women, trying to get all of these girls to come out with you. And I use the term girls, but that's their term, right?
Yeah.
And I say girl, I mean this kind of specific category of valued, pretty young woman that the promoters are after. So, yeah, that was the method.
And what was their reaction when you told them, I want to research that? Isn't that a very confidential scene that actually doesn't want to share too much?
It is and it isn't. So on the one hand, it's all about display, right? It's the conspicuous consumption is about being seen. And on the other hand, there are a lot of backstage secrets that they don't want to be associated with if it comes out into public. And one of them, for instance, are the ways that promoters use girls. Is sometimes they use and exploit friendships with girls to try to mobilize them to come out. They treat girls like objects, or actually I even think of it as like a currency. They treat girls like a form of capital, which they are. And so if the promoter can get a lot of these high quality girls to come out with him, it raises his profile, it raises his income, it raises his level of invitations and connections to the super elite with whom he thinks falsely that he'll end up doing business. Yeah. And he's in this trade of girls for connections and money. And so they're really keen to get those girls to come out with them. And they do all kinds of things to try to get them to come out. And some of them are quite unethical and exploitative, flirting with girls, having sex with girls that live in the model apartment. Why? Because if you can catch the favor of a girl that lives in a model apartment, she's going to bring her 4 roommates out who are all models. And now you've got 5 at the table, right? Rather than just one. So they're very strategic in the way that they develop these relationships and target girls because they're valuable. Now, a lot of promoters are also very hesitant about being associated with pimping. If you look at the club circuit, right, here's 20 beautiful young women that are on a yacht, for some very rich men in the middle of Saint-Tropez. Everybody assumes that like these are women for hire. This is sex work, right? And promoters are really adamant. They're like one of the first things they would say to me is, "I'm not a pimp." And it's not to say that pimping doesn't happen and sex work doesn't happen. Of course it does. But this trade of girls for prestige and visibility and access really is a distinct circuit from sex work. So they were concerned that they didn't want their names associated with something that would call them pimps or call this work. Yeah. And so I'm very careful to show why this is similar to but very different from sex work. Anyway, to come back to your question, there is this one moment that I have in the book, and it was a really telling moment. Promoters themselves don't come from upper class backgrounds. Like they didn't go to prestigious universities or any university. They're extremely charming, and they have a way with words. They can talk to women. They can talk to rich people. They're disproportionately brown and black men, a lot of immigrant men. And they have this like je ne sais quoi suave about them. And they themselves, I think, are impressed with what they've managed to accomplish coming from, very modest backgrounds. And so one promoter, when I was getting to know him and he was inviting me for dinner, and then at the dinner, I would bring them my book. I would show them. My first book was my dissertation was about the fashion modeling industry. I would say, look, I'm an actual writer and a researcher, and I teach at university, and I want to write about your world because I'm really interested in what you do and how it is that you make this whole beauty economy possible. And I think that they really loved that. Yeah, because they themselves think their stories are remarkable, and they were kind of flattered and happy to have somebody tell their story.
That's fascinating. So you actually also caught them in their self worth, right? To get access. Um, when you talk about what is happening in these nightclubs, I was fascinated by the concept that this is all actually not fun. So when I read it, I thought, oh my God, this maybe explains when you go to Saint-Tropez, to Le Cave or something like that, these girls never look to have fun. And I could never explain. I thought, oh, this why? But now after reading your book, I understand why this doesn't look fun at all. So can you talk a little bit about this whole staging of waste?
Yeah. Look, it is and it isn't fun. I can say that, like any big performance, there's a lot of work, and a lot of that is routine and exhausting. And the hours are very tough because we go out for dinner with the promoter at 10 p.m. and I would try to really push it to stay with the promoter as late as possible. That might take me to 4 a.m. when the club closes, maybe 8 a.m. when there's an after party, 10 a.m., the after hour party. So I was really exhausted. But I wasn't drinking and I wasn't taking drugs. There are lots of drugs in circulation if you're 18, right? I was doing it at 32. Like, I can't. And even now I'm 44 and I look back and I'm like, this is miserable. I would never be able to do this now. But at the time, I could definitely see that a lot of people did have these moments of elation. And I say moments very deliberately, right? Because a night that lasts, 6 or 10 or 12 hours is not going to have a continuous vibe that feels great. There's ebbs and flows. But when it does come up, right, when the great DJ hits, or, and DJs are really good at manipulating the energy of a crowd. And so when it works well, when there's a feeling of camaraderie between the girls and the promoter, and promoters that are really skilled at this, I mean, they are able to inflate that feeling of a kind of collective, what the French sociologist Émile Durkheim had called collective effervescence, that feeling of like losing yourself in the moment with all of these other people doing something that you love, which is dancing to electronic dance music. And that's incredibly powerful. And I think that, a lot of people go out for that. But it's hard to convey that, like now that and even now that I'm 40, in my 40s, I'm thinking like, yeah, it doesn't sound that fun actually, but it definitely could be.
Hmm. And there is a whole stage within those clubs, right? You know exactly who has which role depending on where they stand, how they are positioned in the room, what
Yeah,
they do. So, what is the dynamic of a typical night out with the VIPs?
Yeah, so it's funny too because you go into a nightclub and you think that it's a place you can cut loose and everybody is drinking and going wild, but it's actually pretty tightly controlled and orchestrated as a space. And so the seating arrangement is not random. The VIP clients that are known to be big spenders, and maybe they've already dropped their credit card in order to secure a high rent table, which might go for a big night at $10,000 a night for a table. On top of that, you need to buy the bottles and the drinks that will come to the table. They'll be seated closer to the DJ because that's the high end real estate in a nightclub. The girls with the promoter that has the quantity of quality, those girls will be seated next to the high roller, the VIP. And in the in the clubs at the time I studied them, we called them whales. You might know that term from finance or from casino. Whales are these people who make a really big splash, and so really big spenders who might spend 50,000 a night, on up.
Oh.
Uh, they'll get the royal treatment, and all the girls will be seated around them. The owner will have his table, which will also have some B-list celebrities and friends of the club, investors of the club, and then a lot of girls. Um, and then within that space, to keep the place from looking empty, there's this whole hierarchy of value of different people who are let in. One promoter had told me that everybody in the club has something that we need, right? So if you're in the space, then you're valuable for some reason to the space. And the club's job is to try to create this luxury experience that will get people buying as many bottles of this inflated price as possible. So the women are in there because they're beautiful. The men are in there typically because they have money. So it's this gendered hierarchy. But men who might look cool, they might have what we could call cultural capital, but they don't have quite that much money, to spend 10,000 on a table or even 2,000 on a table, but they could spend 50 or 70 on a cocktail at the bar. Then they're allowed in. They're called filler. right? Or like the lettuce of that.
Terrible.
I know. No, it is, right? The civilians, the filler. I mean, it's incredibly discriminatory and hierarchized. And it's also racialized, so the promoters I mentioned are disproportionately Black men, almost never women. The girls are almost, though they're disproportionately white women.
Mhm.
You would never see, like an all Black table of models. The security staff, the bouncers, are very large Black men. The people who are collecting the glasses and bussing the tables, the bus boys, right? Boy is already infantilized. They're short-statured Latino, brown men who are kind of weaving in and out of the crowd. Um, yeah, and then the clients are international. So the whales, the big spenders, it's a lot of businessmen. They might be local New York businessmen or, traveling through town for work, wealthy tourists, or they might be part of that VIP circuit and coming into New York for, I don't know, Fashion Week. Yeah. There's a set of oligarchs that will be there or,
Mhm.
tech investors. And so they're diverse, but not yeah, not so much that it's, like a true kind of reflection of global diversity. So there is this kind of racialized, gendered, uh,
Mhm.
bodily signals in the club about who does what and who's valuable.
Okay. And so the men, because you're also writing about those hierarchies, as you mentioned, um, and you oftentimes see that there are these big, champagne bottles, you call them bottle trains, and some sort of competition happening. So, what are the people doing throughout the night? Why do they do this?
Yeah, so the bottle train, I mean, if you know hip hop, then you've heard about it before, right? The champagne in the club. Or yeah, but sometimes the club, their goal is to try to sell as much of that as possible. So the club sometimes will make a big show out of it. The DJ might interrupt. So I saw this a lot in Saint-Tropez. The DJ will say, "Oh, this big spender in the house from London just bought this," right? And then 10 minutes later, the other big spender in the house, from Pakistan just bought that. And then it starts going up and up, yeah. And so competition makes the night more exciting, and the club will try to ratchet that up. They'll put two big spenders opposite each other. So if the DJ is the most valuable real estate space, they'll put one whale in this corner and one whale at that corner, DJ in the middle, so that everybody sees, the trains going, the bottle trains going here, the bottle trains going there. There's sometimes people are critical of it. In fact, when I did interviews with everybody, the girls, the promoters, and the clients themselves. So I interviewed only 20 clients. I interviewed many more promoters. Getting access to the clients was harder. But when I would do interviews with them, let's say in the boardroom at their, financial firm or in a coffee shop close to their apartment in Chelsea, and we would talk about it, and they would say that, yeah, it's actually pretty gross that people spend 10,000, 50,000, and everybody had a story about that time they were in Saint-Tropez and they saw that guy spend, a
Mhm.
million on champagne, right? And everybody was very critical of that. And so there's an understanding that this somehow violates a norm of middle classness, like restraint, which is what it means to be an elite today, is to consume responsibly or ethically or, in the right way. And everybody saw this as being the wrong way. But in the moment, I think a good club is really able to suspend all of that judgment and celebrate just money, right? And the display of money.
That's actually a very primitive behavior, no? Because I think we know that from very, natural tribes, like to splurge on something, or destroy value or just
Yeah.
wasting to show that you're so well off, right?
Right, right, right. Well, yeah, I mean, there are, tribal connections you could draw to, and I draw it to the Pacific Northwest tribes engaged in ritual squander called
Mhm.
potlatch.
Mhm.
But a potlatch was actually a way of, so in a potlatch, the tribal leaders gather different tribes together and they compete over who can hold the biggest feast. And you see this still and you would see it historically and still today of like wedding ceremonies, right? Like whose wedding can be more
Mhm.
outrageous and outlandish. But in the potlatch, it could go as far as not only feasting, but also destroying excess crops, destroying coppers, breaking canoes, burning blankets. It was like a very, yeah, kind of fascinating, but also somber moments of destruction of excess. And what it did was not inconsequential at all. It was about rank. So it was a way for tribal leaders to show that they were dominant and to humiliate, and in that process to have a lasting consequence of claiming status. That's not the case for the VIP. Like, what happens in Saint Tropez if somebody blows $100,000? Maybe it'll leak to the press, maybe it'll be captured on Instagram, but it doesn't hold any lasting consequences for the global elite, because when you think like what is the global elite, it's not a contained, discrete population of people that are in any way really connected by a set of laws or logics. It's extremely diverse, hypermobile group of people. And they show up in Saint Tropez, not all of them. Some of them show up in Art Basel, South by Southwest, right? And so they kind of know each other sometimes, kind of don't. They had different sources of wealth, different political orientations, nationalities. And so yeah, in some ways, the ritual squander is still very much alive, but the meanings of it and the significance of it, socially, in terms of rank, aren't there.
Uh-huh. You were just mentioning that there is maybe an aspect of humiliation also in there. So do the so for the girls and for the guys who are more the fillers, right? And they see all this and they know that they are being used for like as a prop, so to say, for the whole orchestration of this thing. Do you or did you get any insights about what it does to people if they are not the winners of this whole thing, but rather, just being there to fulfill a position or a role?
Like, I think that, yeah, for sure, there's an aspect of domination which parallels humiliation, to say, look, I have this bottle, right? I pour it for you, or I shake it and spray it on you. I stand in the better place than you, right? You don't even get to your own table. You have to stand in the middle of the crowd. Yeah. So there's this expression of dominance. Um, but I do think it's a has a performative aspect that is really contained in the moment. And people that are there, if they've gotten in, they're also benefiting from that domination of everybody else who got excluded. So, by virtue of it being very important people, it means that if you got in, you're more important than those other people that are queuing up outside the velvet rope. And
So then you can live with the fact that you're not top of the pyramid, but at least you got into this cool people scene.
I think that, if we were to do a sociology of the entourage, we could probably say that everybody in an entourage gets something out of it. Yeah, whether it's real material benefit or it's symbolic, hopeful, right, or just the thrill and the titillation, which I don't think is to be discounted. Like, it's a really important motivation for a lot of behavior that works against people's own interests, is just like the thrill and the excitement of being close to power will make people make a lot of compromises.
Very interesting. I have only a couple of questions left, but one thing that I questioned myself whilst reading the book was, did any one of your informants actually read your book? And if so, what were their reactions? And did you use real names?
Yeah, so that's also how I got access. I didn't use real names. I used fake names of clubs and fake names of all the promoters. And I don't even think anybody asked me to put their real name in, which sometimes happens. Somebody wants their real name in, but in this book, nobody did. So because I think people know that they could look bad. So one promoter that I spent a lot of time with, and I follow him closely in the book, is Dre. And Dre he's based in New York. And when the book came out, I made sure he had a copy. And I was in touch with friends, mutual friends that, I was asking, has he read it yet? And they were like, no, because he's not a big reader. I don't think that promoters generally were big readers. But he and I eventually did have a phone conversation about it, and we've kept in touch, and we've seen each other since the book came out. But our phone conversation went like this: he was kind of flattered that I spent so much time following him in the book, and he knew right away who he was, which character name was his, um, and he also um, he challenged me on only one thing. So I think that there's a lot in Dre's story and the other promoters that are can be pessimistic, could be painful to have those stories told. So in Dre's case, he was really, he's not an American. He was from Europe of African descent, but he really had this American dream quality about him, where he really thought that he was going to be doing business with the super rich, and he would have all of these investors because he's been rubbing elbows with rich people in the Hamptons all these years. And I have a really pessimistic analysis of that in the book, where I show that he has access to girls and he has access to nightlife, and that's not the same kind of capital that it will take to break into and get access to the super rich. And he's marginal. He's going to be marginalized within it, and he'll fail. If his dream is to be at that level of success, he will fail, and that has come true for most of them, including Dre. And he didn't want to talk about any of that. That's very painful. But what he did want to talk about, he said, I don't know if he read it or if he just gleaned it from some of my interviews. He took issue with my interpretation that girls are a form of capital that benefits men disproportionately, and that men are the winners in the beauty economy. And he thought, from his perspective, actually, women stand to gain more and do gain more because they're able to convert beauty into the marriage market. And he's seen many of the beautiful women in the club and models marry rich men. And, from his perspective, he's the dominated one, and the tools that he's been using to try to get ahead.
But is that really true that those girls get married? I thought this is yet another population of women that finally get married, right? It's not
That's
the pretty girl.
anecdotally, sure, it has happened. I don't know statistically. If you look at the data just in demography, the rich people with, from high education backgrounds tend to partner with other rich people with high education backgrounds. It's called homophily. The outliers are the fashion model and the mogul. Think like Donald Trump and Melania. Like, that's not a typical union. The more general pattern would hold. So when I interviewed the clients, they explained that this pool of young women that they meet out in clubs or on the yachts are decoration, they're hookups, they're exciting for a night, but this is not the pool of marriage material. It's not to say it can't happen, but it's not the expectation going in. And I don't think that it's that likely. Yeah.
Wow. Reading your book is like reading a People magazine, and I feel like more people should read it because it's so entertaining, just as, all those accounts on Instagram are out there, like rich kids on Instagram. And there's also this guy, Staat guy, who is funny, making fun of the cool people scene. But there are also quite sarcastic ones, like Super Snake. I don't know whether you know this account, which is pretty like evil, let's say, when he talks about this scene of cool people. Do you think that is something that's gonna change this scene of cool people? Do they care about people criticizing them?
No, I don't think that they care. I mean, they're pretty far removed into their own worlds. I have seen instances in clubs in that I was researching in New York. It happened in Central Palo, also Miami, where security detail of the big spenders made sure that nobody was taking pictures or videos, right? Because they don't want those scenes of excess to get out. And yeah, I could see people being cautious about how they're portrayed because of the potential critique. Again, because this is a violation of expected norms of behavior, that you don't, buy a bunch of champagne and shake it all over the walls and waste it. But in terms of these satirical accounts, I can't say that this would have an impact. And you take the Justad guy as an example. Like, didn't he partner with a luxury brand?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the brand took off, right? Like, kind of.
Little piano also, I think.
Yeah, Little Piano, yeah. And not like the brand was doing bad before, but the customer base really loves the incorporation of the critique into the brand itself, and um, it gives me a sense that there's an interesting thing happening around irony that we should pay more attention to, and that is how irony is used to fold in the critique of the rich. So, for instance, you can have the rich kids of Instagram who might be engaging in what most people would say is offensive behavior. Too many watches and champagne and baby tigers and Ferraris, and they might hashtag it themselves as saying, I know this is tacky, but whatever, and that's an ironical position, to say, or people will self-define as being a rich kid of Instagram when they're making a post, or they used to back when rich Instagram was bigger. And so in some ways, the ironical stance allows somebody to engage in mischievous and norm-violating behavior while also positioning themselves as above the critique. I have so much cultural capital that I know that it looks bad.
Oh, yeah.
I also have the material power and cultural capital to do it anyway.
Yeah.
It really is a show of power that really says, I don't care.
Yeah, wow. Ashley, time is running out. It's so sad because I could go on forever with you. Maybe one last question. Did you keep studying rich people, and what are your current research projects?
Yeah, so I did study rich people, not deliberately. What happened was all of my ethnographies, I tend to just discover them by luck, but luck is always patterns. And so basically the book came out, and a lot of because it got promoted on Amazon, I think it reached a number of unexpected readers, and one of them is a very, very prolific and very successful content creator who runs an online publishing company in Las Vegas, making some of the world's most watched viral videos. And that, we had a number of conversations, and I ended up joining his company and making viral videos myself, which are extremely low barrel pop culture, like teeter drama, cooking hacks, pimple popping, like the stuff that you want to watch, but you end up watching and you're like, why am I watching this? So my research now is about attention, which is a good follow-up from the last book, because beauty is also a way for people to get attention. Yeah. And I've been studying this economy of social media content creators in their pursuit of attention, how they hook it, how they monetize it, whose attention matters. And ultimately, it's about how, even though they have some of the most highly watched content in the world, they themselves become invisible as artists and as creators. Like, nobody knows who they are. And again, they wanted their story to be told, I think, because of that paradox of invisibility, even though they're winners in the attention economy.
Likes and shares are a currency, right? Just
Yes.
funny as.
Yeah.
Ashley, this has been such a unique episode for me with a one-of-a-kind professor as you are, and absolutely cool research. I wish you all the best for the upcoming publication projects, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your questions and for reading the book. That's really great.
If you want to know more about Professor Ashley Mears and her fascinating research, you will find additional information in our show notes of this episode. Until very soon, stay tuned and take care.
Thank you for listening to Luxury on Air with Corinne Seghetti and Felicitas Morhart. This podcast is provided to you by Deloitte Switzerland and the Swiss Center for Luxury Research. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can leave us a 5-star review. If you're keen to stay up to date on what's trending in the luxury industry, don't forget to subscribe. As always, you can find more information about the current episode in the show notes. We wish you all the best. Until next time.